Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Ask Dr. Bob. This is where you get to ask me, Dr. Bob Gebe, Chief Scientific and Medical Officer here at the American Diabetes Association, your questions about diabetes. And each month, when we do this program, for those of you that have been here for a while, will know that we pick a topic and where questions are generated and we sort of talk through. Uh, this month, we're going to talk about the American Diabetes Association scientific sessions. And so before that, let me just remind you, if you're new, one of the things that you can do if you like this program is tell your friends and family and spread the word. And you can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, where I often share lots of other interesting things about diabetes. So, without further ado, let us talk about the topic at hand. And I'm going to pull up the questions that people have asked. Um, and let me get them here. So first is, what is this thing called scientific sessions? I've heard about it. I've seen like stuff on social media. So let me tell you a little bit about this. So, this is really like the meeting for professionals in the world of diabetes, and so it is the 83rd scientific session. So it's been going on for a long time, uh, and it brings together. Really, this incredible group of individuals, about 12,000 of them. We were in San Diego this year. Each year we change locations. It's a big convention hall where all of this happens. And there are literally hundreds of presentations given about all aspects of what's new in the world of diabetes. So this is really the latest and greatest that people from around the world come to. It covers really everything. And so the who comes to this are largely it's scientists and researchers. It's all types of different healthcare professionals. It's industry leaders. We also have some people living with diabetes that come, and this year we invited several more to be part of this. So. Um, one of the other questions is, what do we talk about, like type 1, type 2 diabetes? What happens at this meeting? And it's really everything. It's all aspects of diabetes, pre-diabetes, diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, diabetes during pregnancy. I mean, you name it, it's everything. It's sort of the Super Bowl of diabetes all in one place. And as I said, there literally hundreds of presentations that are given. They're poster presentations, which are cool, where somebody puts up a poster with the scientific findings from a research study, the figures and tables, and they stand in front of that poster, and anybody can come up to them and say, "Well, tell me about your work," and then ask them questions and engage in discussions. And one of the great things that happens at scientific sessions, it's what happens in the rooms when people are at presentations, but sometimes the greatest stuff happens outside of the room, where people are like, "Yeah, I heard about that talk and I thought that was interesting and I'm working on this." And someone else says, "Oh, I'm working on that too. Maybe we should work together." And I can't tell you the number of collaborations that have come from just being at that meeting and sharing a cup of coffee. I can tell you in my career, wow, dozens of like research projects and things that I've done have really been because I met people at scientific sessions. We came up with an idea, we talked about it, and then went from there. So that's a little bit of what is this meeting that you may have heard about. And so um, what like one of the questions is, I heard a lot about obesity at this meeting, and if you follow the popular press, whether it's the New York Times or USA Today or CNN, there were reporters from all of those organizations covering all these stories, and one of the big stories was obesity. So let me talk a little bit about that, because that really probably was one of the bigger headlines if I had to pick one, like out of those hundreds of presentations. Um, so last year It was the first time that there was reported results of taking two hormones that can regulate body weight and putting them together, and that was two hormones, one being GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, so-called GLP-1, and the other was GIP, gastric inhibitory polypeptide. These are hormones made naturally in the digestive tract that help to regulate appetite and body weight. So last year, they presented taking those two hormones. Let me tell you just GLP-1, you may be familiar with. That is the active ingredient of a whole class of medications that are being used to treat people with type 2 diabetes. You may know names like Ozempic or Trulicity or Byetta. Those are all examples of GLP-1 drugs. So last year, they mixed two of these together, and they had a phenomenal weight loss in people without diabetes. They reported on 22% weight loss. So think about what 22% means. So that means if you're 200 pounds, uh, people lost 44 pounds. It's a lot. That's a lot. So, not for everybody, of course, but for certain people, people that are 400 pounds, for example, yeah, it's beneficial for them to be able to lose 22% of their body weight. So that was last year. Why am I telling you about last year when this is supposed to be out? But this year's scientific sessions, well, there's been an explosion in research in that field since that time. So, what they now did is they said, well, if two hormones are good, what about three hormones? And there were studies reporting the effect of a three hormone combination. These are all things not available on the market yet, but will likely go to the FDA in the coming months, and maybe on the market within less than a year. So what do three hormones do? Well, even more weight loss and even some effects on some things beyond just blood glucose and weight, but helping to, for example, improve liver disease in people with diabetes. So, if two hormones are good, how about three? Um, how about two different hormones? There were studies on that. How about the original hormone GLP-1, but instead of taking it as an injection, which all of these therapies are largely injections, what about if we could take it as a tablet and take it at a higher dose that could achieve the same kind of weight loss? And there was reports of that with an orally active high dose GLP-1 drug leading to somewhere in the 20% weight loss. So again, dramatic. Let me put this in perspective. Up until these classes of drugs existed, which is only really a few years altogether, uh, we were excited about drugs that help people lose 5 to 10% of their body weight, which for a lot of people was great. But some need more than that. And so we're in this whole new world. So that is the obesity story. And if you're joining us late, this is Ask Dr. Bob with me, Dr. Bob Gabe, Chief Scientific and Medical Officer of the American Diabetes Association, answering your questions. And this month, we're talking about ADA's scientific session, the 83rd. So the other it was trying to get at what were some of the other exciting discoveries that were presented at scientific sessions. And so I'll tell you about two right off. So one was really talking about mental health, and in particular this idea of diabetes distress. So I don't need to tell you, the in the audience who may have diabetes, it's not easy, right? It can be tough. It can be distressing. Um, People can feel hopeless. People can be anxious about having diabetes, worried about it. All of that falls into this idea of diabetes distress. And there were some great interventions that had psychologists work with people to address that distress and show that it really was effective. So that was one really interesting area. The other is for those of you that use technology to manage their diabetes. There are insulin pumps that deliver insulin, subcutaneously under the skin, and there are continuous glucose monitors that measure glucose continuously. Well, many of you know those two have been combined into one, and one helps drive the other, and some of that automates the insulin delivery, although not fully, but a step closer. And there are studies getting us a step closer in doing that. But here's the one I wanted to talk about is for those of you that wear these devices, you've got to put your insulin pump in one place under your skin, and then your continuous glucose monitor somewhere else on your skin. So it's sort of like two things that you've got to stick in you. Well, trying to reduce the burden for people with diabetes, there was a report where they figured out the technology to make it just all in one. So you'd put one thing in you, and it would be able to do both measuring glucose, continuous glucose monitor, and insulin pump. Okay, let's move on. Just a couple more things. So the next question is: so what about a cure and what's been presented? And I'll ask you to go back. There was an Ask Dr. Bob where we talked about the cure and gave a lot more detail, but I'll just share what was new here. And what was new was an update from one of the more promising approaches, and that is creating stem cells from blood cells that you could create stem cells. They know how to do that now. And they can grow them into beta cells, the cells that make insulin. And so that technology is there. And there is a clinical trial where they've been putting this in people with type 1 diabetes. And they reported on the second person that this had been tried, and that person no longer needed any insulin. The cells sensed the amount of glucose in the blood and produced the exact right amount of insulin and kept their blood glucose in the range of not having diabetes. So, in essence, that is sort of a cure. Uh, what is the caveat? Well, not everyone got that result. Two people did. The other people had better blood glucose control, but they still need to take some insulin. And for this approach right now, you need to take anti-rejection drugs that suppress the immune system, and that has some risks associated with it in terms of making you more likely to get infections. So, yeah, it's a step closer, and quite exciting. So that was the other big story. The last thing I'll address is people had seen online stuff about this innovation challenge that we ran, and that was so cool. Let me tell you a little bit about what that was. So a lot of solutions for people with diabetes is coming from startup companies, and you probably have a sense of like the startup world is really advancing things in all sorts of areas of our lives, and very much in diabetes. So what we did is we created a challenge. If you've ever seen the show Shark Tank, it was a little modeled after that. We had companies apply with their ideas. Uh, we then narrowed that down to the 6 best ideas. We had 3 judges that were potential funders of those ideas, and they all got up on stage, and one by one they gave their pitches to the judges, and we picked the top 3 great ideas. And if you look online, on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you can hear a little bit about those winners, but it was anything from solving the problem of needing to use immune suppressing drugs for transplants for a cure for diabetes, and a company that's got a really cool idea of how to address that, to creating low cost insulin pens for people that inject insulin, not having to use vials and syringes, because um, in large parts of the world, they're still using a vial and syringe to draw up their insulin. It's just not as accurate, and has a whole bunch of challenges. So a low cost solution to that could go global. And the other winner was a way to address really challenging young people that have a lot of social risk in their lives, chaotic lives, that end up in the emergency room for high blood glucoses. Uh, uh, an intervention that helps them with their mental health that was highly effective. So that was the innovation challenge. Finally, there's a question, where can I, are these recorded? Can I watch some of these? Can I watch the Innovation Challenge, for example? And you can go to the American Diabetes Association website. You could look up American Diabetes Association scientific sessions, and you'll see where you can access all this stuff. And at the same place, you can see information about past meetings, what the presentations were and subjects, and all of that. So with that, I think our time's come to a close. I want to thank you for joining me. We talked about scientific sessions. This is Ask Dr. Bob. Please follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter for lots of other interesting information. Tell your family and friends, and we will see you next month. So be